This is Dateline Wyoming, produced in the studios of WyoRadio. Dateline Wyoming is a weekly news feature highlighting community issues and events that shape our lives here in Southwest Wyoming. In-depth analysis and interviews with the people behind the headlines. Presented Sunday mornings at 7 a.m. Views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WyoRadio ownership, management, or those of our sponsors. Time will be made available for responsible dissenting opinion. And now, Dateline Wyoming. Our guest on Dateline Wyoming this morning is Democratic State Senator John Hastert, representing Senate District 13 here in Sweetwater County. This morning we visit with Senator Hastert about expected legislation in the 64th Wyoming Legislature now convening in Cheyenne. That and more on Dateline Wyoming following this message.
Today we decided to walk to school. At the corner, we waited to cross the street. The stoplight counted down. 15, 14,
31? 13?
We took a left on Carroll Garden Street.
Garden Street?
Loud music was coming from a car. Danny's a smart kid, but he gets so distracted.
There were so many other sounds, I didn't know what to focus on.
Danny, Earth to Danny. Suddenly he realized he forgot his homework again.
I left my homework on the table.
At the school steps, we hugged goodbye. I really hope he doesn't have another bad day at school today.
When you can see learning and attention issues from their side, you can be on their side. That's why there's Understood.org, a free online resource for the parents of the 1 in 5 kids with learning and attention issues. Get personalized recommendations, practical tips, daily access to experts, and more. Go from misunderstanding to Understood.org. Brought to you by Understood and the Ad Council.
Senator Hastert, welcome to Dateline Wyoming. You represent Senate District 13. Can you just tell us what area that covers?
Well, thank you. Yeah, Senate District 13 is Olive Green River and Jamestown, along with portions of Rock Springs behind the mall area and community college.
The 64th session of the Wyoming State Legislature starts on January 10th. I imagine you've been kind of busy getting ready to go to that, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been an extremely busy time. There's a lot of activities, a lot of preparation. We've had some meetings, appropriations meetings, the committee that I serve on. Primarily, I serve on several other committees. I'm a select committee on water and also retirement board along with management council. Appropriations is where I'm primarily situated, and we're looking over the governor's budget, proposals for the supplementary budget for this coming session. And there's quite a bit that we're going to have to look at. It's going to be a busy first few weeks for the Appropriations Committee, as we will again be meeting morning, noon, and on adjournment, doing what we call markup on the budget and then getting it ready for the full body.
So what does markup entail?
We kind of mirror the governor's process. The governor interviews all the agencies, and they talk to the governor about their needs, and the governor has asked the agencies to come in with budget reduction recommendations. And so he puts his budget together. It's first presented to the JAC, which is the Joint Appropriations Committee. Then we do the same process of interviewing the agencies, having a discussion with them, looking at areas where they're asking for increases and budget cuts, and kind of going over their budget, asking them questions. And then in the markup session, it's our task to look at the budget the governor recommended, accept his recommendations in each area, or modify it. We can either accept the governor's recommendation, or in the modification, we either increase or decrease the amount granted by the governor.
For the benefit of our listeners who may not be aware, explain just a little bit the difference between the budget session, which was last year, and a general session, which is what we're looking at this year.
Well, the budget session really does focus primarily on the budget. Every agency in the state has to present the budget, and this is an overall state budget. So the main focus of the session is the budget. It's also a 20-day session for the budget session, and any other legislation that is introduced requires a 2/3 introductory vote. On the general session, we do a supplemental budget. It only encompasses a handful of the agencies and doesn't require any introductory votes for any kind of legislation.
Then the general session lasts
40 days.
40 days, and is open to other items besides budget items in particular.
Yes, and generally the supplemental budget isn't as involved as the main budget, so we certainly have plenty of time to listen to other issues that'll be coming up.
We'll be talking about some of the issues that are coming up and some of the things you see as primary issues for this particular session. But can you give us a general sense of just how the whole thing works and how it goes together and what your days look like during a session?
As I stated this earlier, in the first part of the session for the Appropriations Committee, I generally get to the Capitol between 6:30 and 7 a.m. and get prepared for the day. Our meetings generally start around 8. We'll meet from 8 to 10, and then the session will gavel in at 10 o'clock and usually until noon. And at noon, we break until 2 o'clock, and that gives all the committees that meet at noontime an opportunity to not only have their lunch, but then to meet with the public on the bills assigned to those committees. And then at 2 o'clock, we generally come back in and are gavelled in for the afternoon. And that'll vary depend upon the amount of workload that we have for that particular day. And, we might be done at, let's say, 5 o'clock, and then I'll be back in committee meetings. And in the first few weeks of the session, that could be from, till 7, 8 o'clock, sometimes 9 in the evening, meeting with different agencies and then trying to figure out what direction we want to go as a committee on the state budget.
It's been a long time since I took Government 101. Give us a quick rundown of what the process is for getting a bill through the session and to the governor's desk.
It's a pretty good process. It's a very involved process, and it can be very difficult. And I've told people that I believe it should be difficult to pass laws. I think that any bill should go through an extreme amount of scrutiny. So in a general session, once a bill is introduced and gets numbered, then it goes to in this case, let's say it goes to the Senate chamber. The Senate president then assigns it to a committee. Then that committee meets on the bill, listens to public testimony, and takes a vote on the bill. If it passes out of the committee, it goes to the Senate floor, goes to what we call committee of the whole, and that's its first reading, and the proponent of the bill will then explain the bill and make the case of why it should be supported. And it's pretty much an open debate. There's not really a time limit on how long a bill can be debated in first reading. And if it passes first reading, it goes to a second reading. It has to pass then a third reading, and a third reading is when you take a roll call vote. And if it passes third reading, that's when it passes that chamber. From there, then it goes over to the House of Representatives. The Speaker of the House then will do the exact same thing, and that's assign it to a committee, has to be heard in committee, public testimony there again, and then it goes to the House floor for 3 readings. And then if it's amended in the second house, in the second chamber, then you have to reconcile the bill then goes back to the Senate, or the amendments will go back to the Senate for approval. If they're not approved, then you have to have a conference committee then is put together to discuss the amendments and work out a compromise on the amendments. Sometimes it's just a matter of a legislator wants an explanation of why that amendment was put on. So you get to conference committee, and then once the conference committee passes the votes on the bill or on the amendments and passes it, it goes back to each of the chambers for a final vote. And then once that happens, then it heads to the governor's office. Then the governor's office has his staff look over the bill. I know that they have their attorneys look for constitutional issues and whatnot. And then once they have deemed it as constitutionally fit bill, then the governor, then it goes to his desk, and he has the choice of signing the bill into law or vetoing the bill, or also the third is allowing the bill to go into law without his signature. So it is quite an involved process, but I have a lot of respect for this process.
Well, intentionally so. I mean, it keeps frivolous laws from showing up on the books, does it not?
Well, certainly, and as you can, hearing that each bill has to have, a committee meeting with public testimony, 3 readings on each chamber floor. You definitely weed out a lot of the virtually all the frivolous bills in that process.
We were talking with Dave Hanks last Sunday. He felt it was important for constituents to be in touch with the representatives and the legislators down there as they go through. Speak a little bit about the relationship between your constituents and what you're doing in Cheyenne.
I think that's critically important. I just received an email yesterday from an individual with a concern about some upcoming legislation, and he outlined his concerns, and I replied to him today and shared my thoughts on that topic with him. And I really applaud and encourage people to get in touch with their legislators, to listen in to the session. Our entire session is broadcast live, as our Joint Appropriations Committee meetings are also broadcast live. I invite people to listen in. I invite people to text if they have my number. I invite people to send emails, to offer input. I don't consider myself an expert on any of the topics. It's the people out there that help make me an expert on the topics. And so I look towards people in the field, lobbyists sometimes, and individuals to get some assistance. I can tell you that the school districts are fabulous at providing me information and timely information as I need it. And that helps out considerably. So I really encourage people to be involved and pay attention to what's happening.
There's a website they can go to find out that information
Right.
for legislators' contact information.
It's called the LegisWeb website. It's LegisWeb, legisweb.state.wy.us. And that gets you into the home page. And from there, you can navigate and find the audio, live audio feed. You can find all the bills that have been filed, and you can read each one of them. You can find your legislators' contact information on my website for the legislature. I have my cell phone there as well as my email address. So I really do encourage people to be involved. And, like I said, again, I just can't express how necessary it is to pay attention and how vitally critical it is to pay attention to what is happening.
Another way that people can get in contact with you is simply Google Wyoming State Legislature, and it'll bring up those websites, won't it?
Absolutely.
With the budget session the way it is, and because of the state of the economy, the budget is going to be a primary focus on a lot of issues, isn't it?
We'll be coming into the session with about $800 million less than what we had in the previous session. So we definitely have some issues to figure out. Our biggest one will be education funding. The governor himself has proposed about $249 million in reductions. So that's approximately 8%. But you combine that with the judiciary reductions, and it's about $253 million for the 17-18 biennium.
As the economy turns down, sometimes the need seems to go up, and it's a real struggle to balance the cutting with making sure that basic services are maintained.
We need to maintain a basic government, and we need to be able to provide our cities, towns, and counties the resources that they need to operate, as they're the government closest to the people. I don't believe it's my job to micromanage the cities and counties. My job is to provide them resources they need to provide the necessary services to the people of Wyoming.
Our guest on Dateline Wyoming this morning is Democratic State Senator John Hastert, representing Senate District 13 here in Sweetwater County. When Dateline continues, we will discuss with Senator Hastert the challenges of funding K-12 education in the state of Wyoming.
My name is Dale Pazinski. I'm 19 years old, and this is how I live united. I've always been kind of a computer geek, and I found a way to use those skills to help the homeless in my community. For people facing hard times, computer skills and a basic resume are so important. It may seem like a small thing, but it makes a huge difference in people's lives. So with United Way, I created a program where I work with the homeless. Together, we go through their whole job history, write a resume, and then save it on their very own USB drive. We provide workbooks and training certificates. I even budgeted for cupcakes so we can celebrate as a class when one of our people gets a job. That's huge. When somebody says, "Hey man, that job that you helped me apply for, I got it." That's what Living United feels like to me. My name is Dale Pazinski. I help people achieve financial independence. So I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer, Live United. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Dateline Wyoming now continues with Democratic State Senator John Hastert representing Senate District 13 here in Sweetwater County. School funding is going to be a big issue. How do you see that coming around?
That's the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and it will be having a lot of discussions. We can look at identifying reductions or modifications to the current funding formula and reductions to agencies supported by the School Foundation Program. We can use our savings. Diversions from existing revenue streams is a possibility. Reversions to the spending policies and revenue enhancements. And, that's just a clever term for taxes. And I think that we have a lot of options before we would ever want to do something like that. We definitely have enough in savings to fully fund education for this biennium. Of course, the problem there is that if we don't have some kind of revenue turnaround in the state by the end of the biennium, by the end of 18, then we'll be facing an even bigger hill to climb. One of the first things we can look at doing is what I call better money management, and that is doing things like diverting the 1% severance tax over to education. That would help there in itself. We have a lot of options available, and it's just going to be trying to figure out what the appetite of the legislators are after we listen to some more public input. I think we really still need to listen to the districts around the state and before we really formulate an action plan.
And the problem you run into there is not all of the school districts in the state are on an equal level as far as financing and what they can do, are they?
No, they're not, but that is one of the things that's in the Supreme Court's decision, that is we pretty much need to equitably fund school districts across the state. So we give them the block grant, the basket of goods, if you will, and that's based on each school district's ADM or their student population. We're going to be faced with a lot of other issues. We still have capital construction. And then even if we don't build any other facilities in the state, we still have somewhere in the neighborhood of $80 million to tackle with what we call major maintenance, maintaining the schools that we have.
It's well and good to build facilities, but you have to look down the road and make sure that there's something there to take care of them and maintain them once they're built.
Yes, and these capital construction for the school facilities, we've lived on the COLIS bonuses, and those have always ebbed and flowed, but those are absolutely running out. So we do need to identify a solid funding stream for education.
Are there other issues or bills that you expect to come up during this legislature?
Well, there's always a few surprises. I was looking on the website. As far as Senate files go, I think there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 60, and most of those are committee bills right now, and usually the committee bills, for the most part, aren't too controversial. But I know that one bill in particular has certainly garnered an awful lot of interest from people across the state, and that's the constitutional amendment for the federal lands to state management. There's a lot of concern when the committee met in Cheyenne a few weeks ago. It was standing room only for that committee hearing, and there was literally hundreds of people that wanted to testify and discuss that issue. And I think the biggest fear is losing access to public lands, and I don't think any of us want that. I certainly don't. My concern is if the state is going to manage the state lands, where will we get the resources? And I know there's some ideas floating around there, so at this particular point I'm opposed to this. However, with anything, I go in with an open mind. I want to listen to what the proposals are. But I'm really solidly locked into protecting public land.
So what would that bill do then?
Well, the constitutional, it has to go to a vote of the people. And it would be a vote of the people to decide if the state would take over federal lands. But then there has to be action from the federal government that would actually allow us to do that. So this has a very long road ahead of it. Even if it were to pass, even if it were to get voted on, there's so many details and so much that has to happen with this before it would ever pass.
I understand there is a bill that will be proposed dealing with internet sales tax.
Yes.
Do you think that will have some traction?
Well, and I think it will. This is all part of the streamlined sales tax proposal of 2000. So you're talking like 16, 17 years back, the streamlined sales tax proposal, which was to encompass all the states and get everybody on equal footing. But there's things in there that people have kind of dragged their feet on. And I think with our booming economy over the years that, those kind of things have been put on the back burner. Definitely will be looked at. Will it have much effect in Wyoming? I'm not so sure. You look at the facts that, in Sweetwater County, sometimes you're limited to places you can shop and for the variety. And people are going to shop on the internet regardless. Myself tried to purchase as much as I can locally, but when you're limited to a selection, then you're pretty much forced to take a look at the internet for different options. Is it really going to have a big effect? I'm not so sure. We'll definitely keep an eye on that and see what is going to come with that.
It would definitely provide some additional sales tax revenue.
Yes, it could.
Are there other issues you see that coming up in this session that people may be interested in?
I've been watching the internet. I know that the cease and transfer station issues with our landfills closing and getting resources for those is going to be a big deal for Sweetwater County. Some of the other things I looked at was the bark beetle. I definitely one that likes to get out and recreate. And some of my favorite camping areas have been devastated by the bark beetle. And, there's some mechanisms in there for funding of that. Looking for enhancements to the Hathaway Scholarship Program. Much of my time has been focused on the budget, education funding, and what we're going to do along those lines. Before it's all said and done, there's going to be a few hundred bills filed. So with just being about 60 bills on the website right now, I think, we're in for quite a ride here coming up.
One last question. We're getting close to the end of our time here, but would you talk just a little bit about the philosophy of the citizen legislature and how important that is to the process?
I think the citizen legislature is a grand process. I absolutely love it. One of the things that people applaud about the state of Wyoming is how accessible the legislators are to the people. I live in a house in a neighborhood, in Green River. I go to the grocery store, to the convenience stores, and go to work every day, and just like everybody else does. And I see the same problems and face the same issues that everybody else does. And so I'm able to better work with people and work with the issues, knowing how it affects people and people having access to their legislators. I have one of my favorite stories is when Dr. Leach from the community college first got to Wyoming. She came into us from Texas. I met her at a meeting in Cheyenne, and she told me she was going to testify for the first time at a meeting the following day. And I said, well, I'd can meet with you for breakfast and we can have a discussion about how things work in Wyoming. And about halfway through the breakfast, she said, this would never happen in Texas. I said, what do you mean? And she said, being able to have access to my senator, it just wouldn't happen. I would go to the local office, and maybe somebody at the local office would tell somebody at the main office, and maybe somebody at the main office would tell the senator. but to have a face-to-face discussion and just a casual breakfast, that would never happen. So that really demonstrates, the accessibility of the legislators to the citizens of Wyoming, and I think that's really important.
Access is important, and I think it takes care of the problem of professional politicians, if you will.
Yeah, you still see some long-term legislators. I myself am heading into my 14th year, so we still get some longevity. You have to love the process. You have to love to serve to be in the Wyoming Legislature, because there's very little to no pay involved, and it's just an absolute love and desire to serve the citizens and people of Wyoming.
Any final thoughts?
Again, I would really encourage people to pay attention, to communicate with their legislators, to be involved, and let us know what you think. I so welcome people's input on issues. I think that's the biggest thing. And if you happen to be in Cheyenne, come and see us. Come and visit. Come to it's our temporary capital, but come and call me out and let's have a conversation.
You have been listening to Dateline Wyoming. Today our guest has been Democratic State Senator John Hastert, representing Senate District 13 here in Sweetwater County. I'll look at our program for next week following this message.
My name is Tom Thornton.
And my name is Cindy Thornton. We're retired, and this is how we live united.
We decided to volunteer with United Way at our community free health clinic.
United Way is how we contribute, because we know our time and money are going to the right places.
Judging by the thank yous we get at the clinic, I'd say we're doing the right thing with our retirement, too. We're Tom and Cindy Thornton. We volunteer at our community free health clinic. We don't just wear the shirt.
We live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
This is your host, Tom Ellis, with an invitation to join us next Sunday at this time for Dateline Wyoming as we visit with Lindsay Travis, Public Relations Director for the Sweetwater County Library System. You have been listening to Dateline Wyoming with your host, Tom Ellis. Dateline Wyoming is a public affairs presentation of WyoRadio News presented every Sunday at this time, highlighting community issues and events that shape our lives here in Southwest Wyoming. Views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WyoRadio ownership, management, or that of our sponsors. Time will be made available for responsible dissenting opinion. Audio copies of this program will be available each Monday following the program's airtime on Sunday at youtube.com/WyoRadio.